Hey, what is up, middle school gang? I am back on another Wednesday with my dear antlers in my office. Anyway, so this week we are talking about a hot topic item, and it's something that you and I both do, and it is arguing, and specifically arguing with your family. And so the guys at Orange have put together a rockin' episode for us this week. Watch this, and I'll see you at the end.
Fun fact, almost an entire hour of every day is spent doing one thing with our families, arguing. Research shows that we average around 6 arguments a day with our family members. That's an average of 42 arguments a week. But it doesn't stop there. We argue about 180 times with our families a month. That's over 2,000 arguments a year. Talk about a lot of arguing. If you're anything like me, you find yourself arguing with other people or listening to other people argue or getting caught up in arguments you don't want to be in. A lot. People argue over sports and politics and family stuff and friendship drama and what's ultimately the best Billie Eilish song and if LeBron is really the greatest of all time. You might feel like you spend a ton of your conversations with other people just arguing. Seriously. Stop and think about the last argument you got into or witnessed with someone else. Was it this week? This morning? 5 minutes before you walked in the door today? What was it about? Something really big and important? Or something pointless? Either way, I know how you feel. Because honestly, I've been there more times than I can count. I was 12 years old. Me and my brother were racing to the car for obviously to see who was gonna get the front seat. Not only was I beating him, I tripped while I was running, still beat him to the front seat, and do you know he not only shoved me out of the way, we were literally fighting over the handle of the car, and he slammed my fingers in the door. And guess who got the front seat still? He did. Do you know that we argued the entire time with me screaming and crying in the back seat with swollen fingers? Okay, why am I telling you all this? Well, whether you realize it or not, arguments happen all around us. They happen a lot with all kinds of different people over all kinds of different things. And honestly, it will probably be this way for the rest of your life. I mean, all you have to do is glance at social media to see people arguing over things like politics and religion to know that that's true. Arguments are everywhere you look. And I think most of us probably feel like arguments are bad. I mean, conflicts usually don't make you feel great, and they can be really difficult and uncomfortable to have. In fact, I think most of us try to avoid arguing if we can, right? I know I do. We may have strong opinions about things, but we don't argue about them because we want to fit in and not stand out. We don't want to offend someone or make someone upset. But here's the thing. I've learned not all arguments are bad. Arguing can actually be good if it's done in a way that's healthy and respectful. That's why I think it's an important subject to talk about. Because if we don't learn how to argue in a healthy way, the quality of our relationships with our friends or family members or teammates or people in our small groups, pretty much everybody we come in contact with, it's on the line. You see, conflict is a part of life. And that's because relationships are a part of life. Whether it's a friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, classmate, a parent, sibling, coach, someone in your small group, or a random person on social media. At some point, you're gonna experience conflict. In other words, you're gonna argue. And that could be challenging for a lot of reasons. For starters, feelings are usually involved. People don't usually argue about something they don't care about. Think about it. When you argue with your parents over your grades, it's because your parents care about the grades you get. When you argue with your best friend about the lie they told you, it's because you care that your friends are honest. When you see adults arguing about things like who should be the next president, it's because they care about choosing the best person for the job. A lot of times we argue simply because we care a lot about what we're arguing about. Or we care about who we're arguing with. You don't want to see your friend make a bad choice. You don't want your girlfriend to break up with you. You don't want your older sibling to talk to you that way. So you argue, not because you want to, but because you care that much about the other person. And when you argue, your feelings get hurt. Someone says something harsh or rude or deeply hurtful in the heat of an argument, and well, those things are hard to come back from. So what do? Well, sometimes we avoid the person altogether. That's what I do. We don't talk to them. We ghost them. We completely disappear. We hope that eventually the hurt feelings or those reasons why we argued will disappear too. Or maybe we do talk about it, just not to them. Instead of talking to the person we've argued with, we talk to everyone else. But that can't really get us anywhere closer to solving the issue, can it? I think one of the biggest reasons arguments can be challenging to navigate is this: the other person thinks differently than we do. Maybe you've argued with a friend who thought using certain words was okay, but you 100% believe those words were hurtful. Or maybe you've argued with a teammate because they had a totally different strategy on how to win the game. Maybe you've seen people argue in the comment section of Instagram because they had totally opposite views from one another. Regardless of who is arguing, usually this is what happens. Instead of listening to what someone else has to say, or talking to them calmly about their viewpoint, or even ignoring it altogether, we jump right into an argument. Why? Because honestly, we can't understand how they could think differently than we do. So what do? We spend our energy trying to convince them that we're right. After all, isn't that the whole point of an argument? To prove your point? To get the other person to come to your side? To win? To be right? See, I think the biggest problem we have when it comes to the way we navigate arguments is that we feel like there has to be a winner and a loser. And I don't know about you, but I definitely don't like to lose. That's the mindset a lot of us have when it comes to arguments. We want to win. We want to be right. And it doesn't matter what we have to say or do to make sure at the end of it, we come out on top. But what if that's the problem holding us back? What if arguing to win isn't really a win at all? And what if trying to be right isn't actually right? Remember what I said earlier? Conflict happens. No matter how hard we may try to avoid it or distance ourselves from it, at some point, we're gonna find ourselves in an argument with someone we're being argued with. And because that's the case, I think it's important that we learn a better way to handle it, a way that allows us to aim for more than just being right. Today, we're gonna look at something Jesus' half-brother, James, wrote down. James was writing a letter to a group of Christians in the early church, and there's some wisdom that's an absolute game changer when it comes to how we can handle arguments. Check it out. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Notice what James is saying. This is advice for everyone. Not just the people I agree with, and not just the people who think they're right, and not just the people with the biggest tempers or the most passionate voices. This is for all of us. Now, because James wrote this letter to people who were following Jesus, I think the instruction is even more powerful. The message is for everyone, but it's especially important for those of us who believe in Jesus. As followers of Jesus, this is how we're supposed to communicate to other people. This is how we're supposed to argue. So what did James say we're supposed to do? First, he told us to be quick to listen. In other words, when you find yourself in an argument, listen first. Do your best to hold off from speaking until you've actually made an effort to listen, to hear what the other person is saying. I think just applying this first piece of wisdom alone could solve a lot of our disagreements, don't you? So often, the reason our arguments get so heated or go on for so long is because we don't make an effort to listen to the other person, or we don't feel like they're listening to us. James followed that by telling us to be slow to speak. Now, for some of us, this is particularly difficult. We want to speak what's on our minds all the time, but especially in an argument, the thought of not saying what we think or feel, that's just crazy. But remember, slow to speak doesn't mean saying no to speak. It doesn't mean that we just sit back and take it. James wasn't asking us not to defend ourselves or our points of view. Instead, he's asking us to pause before we do, to stop before we talk, to think before we speak. I don't know about you, but in my experience of most of the things I've regretted in arguments are things I've said without thinking about them first. Taking a minute to pause, choosing to be slow to speak, that could be the answer to a lot. If James were writing this letter today, to me or to you, he might also include be slow to text, slow to post, slow to comment, slow to talk behind someone's back. I'm not sure which is hardest for you, but I think we all probably need to pause and think about it before we actually do it. All of this really adds up to the final thing James wrote here. Be slow to become angry. This is a total shift in the way we approach arguments. After all, aren't we usually arguing because we're angry? James wasn't asking us not to be angry. He wasn't asking us to ignore our feelings, but he was asking us to lead with another feeling, love. Choosing to be slow to become angry means choosing love when we want to hate. It means focusing on the person, not the point we're trying to make. It means valuing the relationship more than being right. What I've learned is care more about the person you're arguing with than the point you're trying to make. Arguing happens. It's a part of life. But how it turns out really depends on how we choose to handle it. So the next time you find yourself in a position to argue, I want to challenge you to care more about the person you're arguing with than the point you're trying to make. I mean, think about it. What would it look like for you to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry? I think if we all do this, we'll find that the way we argue and the way we feel will both change for the better. Of course, I know this isn't always easy, so let me share a few things that might be helpful. First, memorize this verse. Really commit James 1:19 to memory. Trust me, it's that important. You want this to be in your brain ready to go the next time you find yourself about to argue. When you memorize it, you'll think of the verse first. It'll be a reminder of how you can handle your argument well. Next, apply it to someone. Think about the person in your world who needs you to actually follow James's instructions. Who do you find yourself tempted to argue with often? Someone in your family? A friend? A kid on your team? In your mind, put their face next to this verse. That way, when you think of that person, you'll also think of James's words on how you can better approach them. Lastly, put yourself in their shoes. This one is tough, I know, but I want to challenge you to see more in that person than just your differences, your argument, and your stance. I want you to try to see and understand their side. This is part of being quick to listen. It's part of being quick to understand another person's point of view. Jesus could have won every argument ever, but he still talked to people. He still made time to listen to people. He still made an effort to hear their perspectives. And putting yourself in someone else's shoes will help you do the same. At least it does for me. It doesn't mean you'll always agree with what they think, but it does mean you'll try to understand why they think that. It means you'll try to understand them. Remember, care more about the person you're arguing with than the point you're trying to make. And that's exactly what we're going to keep talking about in groups today. Keep in mind, not everyone in your group has the exact same view on things that you do, and that's okay. Talking with people can actually help you understand other ways of thinking. Now, as you head out, I want you to think about this question. When I argue, do I argue to win or to understand? Thanks so much for hanging out, and I'll see you soon.
Hey gang, I'm back. Thanks for watching that. If there's one thing that I'm going to take away from this episode, it's that I spend way too much time arguing. And honestly, my statistics are probably higher because I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, and that tends to be the challenger. And so I like to challenge people, and that's not always a good thing. So my goal for myself is to argue much less. Much less. Anyway, I hope you will join me in that. I want to challenge you to argue much less because I know you enjoy a good argument. Anyway, I will see you guys on Sunday. I'm super pumped, and have a great week.